Hello, my name is Murray Rice. I'm with the University of North Texas. On behalf of myself and my collaborator, Dr. Ron Kolofsky of the University of Tennessee, I'd like to welcome you to our paper today entitled An Infatuation with Building Things, Business Strategies and Development in a Small City Context. So as we begin, I just want to acknowledge that this presentation is a version of an article we published in Growth and Change in 2020. And so you can access a more full version of our research comments and findings there. The context for this research falls in a couple of related fields, including regional economic development and business development. Weakness in the research stream is a historical bias toward large cities. I mentioned Boulder, Phoenix, Vancouver, and Calgary here as good examples, but we could broaden the list, of course. Probably Silicon Valley and Boston would be poster children of this kind of effect where research has really focused on well-known large communities with obvious spectacular success. And this is a gap that needs to be addressed because small cities also develop. And so what about business development success in small places? They can succeed as well, and they do, and we need to understand those better. So this particular project focuses on understanding business development in Steinbach and Winkler, two small cities in southern Manitoba. Both cities share a couple of features which allow us to treat them effectively for the purposes of this research as a single research unit. They're both small, less than 20,000 population. They share an agricultural economic base, which usually means a slow-growing economic base. They have a shared culture and history, and also both have grown tremendously in recent years. And so that's really the point of interest that causes this whole study to be relevant. So where are Winkler and Steinbach? Well, we can identify them on the map. They're both approximately an hour and a half removed from the larger center of Winnipeg, the largest city in Manitoba and the provincial capital. So Winkler and Steinbach are far enough removed from Winnipeg and its metropolitan area that we can consider them to be distinctive. And yet, because of their common features, common culture, common situation, there's a lot there which allows us to treat them as a single unit. And so that's what we're doing for purposes of this study. But let me just share a little example of what's been happening in Winkler. So the Google Earth engine, Winkler 2000, you can see the city in the middle of the screen and the map of surrounding agricultural land. It's fairly well defined in terms of urban and rural, not a lot of mixing, and that's 2000. Advanced to 2018, the latest year that we have satellite imagery for through Google Earth, there's the change. And so, again, going back and forth between the two, we can see that there's been substantial growth, especially substantial considering the size of the city, less than 20,000 residents. Some big expansions in terms of new industrial areas being opened up and new residential development over that 18-year period. So there's a lot of growth. It's not typical for these agricultural cities, small cities on the Canadian prairies to see that much growth, especially in a non-metropolitan setting. So what's going on here? So as I say, the article has more evidence, but I hope this just gives an indicator of what's going on in Steinbach and Winkler. There's a lot of expansion, so we need to get to the bottom of this. So we're focused here on strategies and conditions that local business leaders connect with business success. So these are not just strictly public accessible numbers, but these are assessments that are private and essentially confidential in nature. And so characterize them as views, assessments of top leaders in the Steinbach and Winkler communities. And really the only way to get at that is through survey work, and so that's what we did. Our research gathered business insights from 14 senior leaders representing 11 businesses and 2 public institutions in both cities. So it's not a large sample size. We weren't aiming for statistically significant samples, but what we were looking for was connecting with the right people, the leaders who really knew what was going on. And you can see from this list a number of different firms spread out across the local economies: agriculture, consumer services, real estate, retail, all of that. A wide range of sectors were involved in both Steinbach and Winkler, and there's some overlap where some of these businesses are in both. And we can see, just looking at the business leader titles: senior manager, manager, owner, partner, those kind of people. These are the people who are senior in nature and who really know what's going on in their city. So this is a great group of people to involve in trying to understand what's driving business growth in Steinbach and Winkler. So the study employed a survey instrument that had standardized and unstructured questions. Every business leader received the same survey instrument. Public sector leaders were given a separate but related survey. And in total, these people were very generous with their time, averaging around an hour, some up to 2 hours. I think the shortest one was half an hour, 45 minutes. So people devoted a lot of time, a lot of insight to our research. And so the findings of the research, from the structured question side, what we were trying to determine was, out of a list of common business development strategies, which of those ones, the things that the previous research have established as broadly applicable in other places, which of these common business strategies actually apply in a Winkler and Steinbach setting, and which are least applicable. So that was the aim there, to take the results of research consensus and take that to the Winkler and Steinbach communities and say, hey, this is what worked elsewhere. What is working here? Do any of these strike home? And the overall result is that almost all of these competitive advantages that we listed and competitive challenges that resonate in other places had very little local acceptance or recognition. So that was an interesting finding in its own. And on the unstructured side, what we were trying to do is, just outside of any priorities or understanding that we as researchers have for the study, we wanted to give the local leaders time to explain what they view as the most successful business development practices. Why do they think Winkler and Steinbach were expanding? And the overall result is they emphasized two distinctive economic development assets and strategies on their own, and this was rather overwhelming in nature. Very, very many people saying similar things. So the actual findings, one of the assets that were being developed that led to the emergence of Steinbach and Winkler were non-local connections, where they followed a sequential, stepwise process of engaging with national and continental business networks and resources. So we saw this in a couple of ways. A manufacturer targeting international distributors at trade shows, so knowing who to approach and what to say and what they wanted, and this gave them access to continental markets for just a little local manufacturer. Another one, an entrepreneur we talked with, traveled the continent in search of retail concepts that could be brought back to Manitoba. So new kinds of retail services that were not already present in Manitoba, what could they introduce to Manitoba? So that kind of forward thinking is very intriguing to see. So that's one side of the research findings. The other part, leveraging local cultural resources, this recognition that the Mennonite culture that the entire community of Steinbach and Winkler is built on had a view of work that really favored business creation and hard work, quality work. This is part of the culture. So a local manufacturer actually gave the title for this talk here. They talked about the local workforce being driven by an infatuation with the concept of building things. It almost was portrayed to us in addiction terms. This desire to create, it's something that they almost had to do. And so that was really interesting. 8 of 11 local businesses made similar comments about that, and almost all of them drew that connection directly back to the Mennonite roots of the region. So very interesting stuff. So there's broad agreement on this local strength, but that also led to an assessment of a threat that also was overwhelmingly mentioned, and what did the community need to do in response. And so the threat was the breakdown of the intergenerational transfer of values. Young people were not seeing work and hard work and quality work and business building in the same way as the older people in the community. Mentorship and education had broken down. So a lack of success in passing down work ethic from one generation to the next, seen as a real threat to the community. So what did the community do? They targeted immigration to bring in people from communities in Mexico, South America, and Germany who still had cultures that lined up with the traditional values that are part of Steinbach and Winkler. So if they couldn't grow them, they brought them in. And that was the response there. So conclusion, business communities are generating business success using a really distinctive profile of resources and strategies that are different from larger centers. And so this is worthwhile for this research to uncover. Non-local resources and contacts are central in this, as well as leveraging of local cultural assets. So these were clear findings. But they're also concerned about ability to maintain a distinctive culture. So there are threats, there's challenges, but there's a reason for Steinbach and Winkler to be doing what they're doing. And we need more understanding of that. So key questions for more research: what about other smaller centers that are non-Mennonite in history? What do other successful small cities do? And what about the challenge of local culture in particular as a foundation for local success when cultural distinctives are hard to maintain in our present era of global media? So thank you very much to the University of North Texas College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences for funding the fieldwork that resulted in this research. Thank you for your attention.